Okay, welcome to the Unit 6 test review. The following video, we're going to try to keep it under 10 minutes, is going to cover all the topics that you need to know for your Unit 6 test. Remember, you can get your extra credit for the test if you complete the Unit 6 study guide, which is posted in Teams under Unit 6 and then in the Files tab. All right, let's start with big business. First, we need to know the term laissez-faire, lazy government, hands-off government. At the time, the government having this relationship of hands-off with big business allowed for big business to grow, allowed for the economy to grow, but it also allowed for big business to mistreat the workers. Less restrictions on big business meant that they could pay their workers whatever they wanted to. They could have whatever conditions they wanted to, and there was no control. There was no one to stop them. We need to know the term robber baron. Remember, robber baron describes the big business leaders, their negative side, their dark side, building off of the backs of their workers, shutting down their competition. It's a term used to criticize big business leaders during this Gilded Age. Urbanization, another term that we need to know. The movement, the mass movement of people from a rural country setting into an urban city setting. And the reason for that movement was because people saw the jobs that were in the cities, an opportunity to start over. One of the major cities at the time is going to be New York City, the industrial capital of the United States. People will move to the cities for that opportunity that they could not find in the more rural setting. Because of urbanization, we are going to see a change in the cities. And because of industrialization, we also see a change in the standard of living. The Sherman Antitrust Act, another term that we need to know. The Sherman Antitrust Act is going to try to regulate big business. Now remember, trust is another term for monopoly. Okay, the goal of a monopoly is to limit competition. Limiting competition is bad for the consumer and it's bad for the economy. We want to have choice. We want to have options in price. Monopolies take that away. So the Sherman Antitrust Act was an opportunity for the government to step in and try to break up those monopolies, those trusts. It was unsuccessful because this legislation was too vague and very difficult to apply. So we will not actually see trusts being broken up until other legislation is passed. Social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, remember the phrase survival of the fittest. This idea is going to be used to promote the bad practices of big business, defending the fact that the businesses that are surviving are the most fit. Those that close, we say, are unfit. They didn't work hard enough. Same thing applies to the social classes. The wealthy are successful because they worked the hardest. So social Darwinism will be used to defend the bad practices of this Gilded Age. High protective tariff. We need to remember that first, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. Taxes on imported goods, when they go up, makes foreign goods more expensive. Making those foreign goods more expensive encourages American manufacturing because the products that are made here that don't have that high tax on them become cheaper, which is how you encourage people to buy American made goods. High protective tariff encourages American manufacturing. Now, I mentioned earlier that the effect of industrialization on society was an increase in the standard of living. As industry is growing, as more products are being produced, those products allow for our day-to-day activities to be easier. when we see products making life easier, everybody starts to need them. A washer, a vacuum, an iron. Today we have cell phones. These things are products that we say we can't live without. But those expenses that come with these new products that everybody needs to survive increases what the standard of living used to be. It becomes more expensive to just exist in society because of industrialization. Other effects that we see overcrowding in cities. We see an increased gap between the rich and the poor class. Remember, 90% of the wealth is controlled by 10% of the people. More than 2/3 of the population is going to belong to the lower class. This big, huge gap between the workers and what they make and the industrialists up at the top. The labor movement, another big topic that is on your test. The labor movement and labor unions form in response to poor working conditions and low wages. So eventually workers start to catch on with the fact that the conditions they work within are terrible. They start to come together. Unions use collective bargaining. Remember, collective, coming together as a group to bargain or negotiate for better conditions, better pay. The American Federation of Labor is going to be one of the unions that forms to solve those bread and butter issues, better conditions, better pay, better hours. Okay, the American Federation of Labor, bread and butter, workers coming together to change their work environment. Government responding to the labor movement strikes. The government is always often in the beginning going to side with big business, using the military and their power to break up any strikes, to put down any actions by the labor movement. Because remember, the government sides with big business because they were good for the economy. Fixing what the workers were demanding would cost money. It would have to sacrifice how good the economy was doing. Child labor, also something that the labor movement is going to push to get rid of. The labor movement will say children should be in school. They shouldn't be in factories in dangerous conditions. But children were cheaper to employ, so big business wants to keep them. We also need to note the tactics used by managers. Remember, the employer would use lockouts to stop workers from coming in until they accepted the conditions. They would use blacklist to threaten workers of ever getting another job. They would use yellow dog contracts to force workers to agree to never join a union in order to get employment. And then the tactics used by unions are going to be strikes, boycotts, and picketing against the management in order to get what they want. So there's a difference between the tactics used on each side. Make sure we note that. The last major topic that's on your test is going to be immigration. We'll start with anti-immigration. The pieces that we need to remember: the Chinese Exclusion Act. Remember, the Chinese Exclusion Act suspended Chinese immigrants from coming to the United States in an effort to decrease the number of immigrants in the United States. The Gentlemen's Agreement went to do the same with Japanese laborers. This was an agreement with Japan to discourage any laborers coming to the United States. And then the other piece that goes with anti-immigration is that belief, the nativism belief, that Americans born in America are superior to any immigrant coming in. And that belief is going to push for the passage of legislation such as the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Gentlemen's Agreement. We also need to remember the melting pot theory of assimilation. Remember, assimilation was trying to push these immigrants to take on characteristics of American culture. We use assimilation against the Native Americans as well. We pushed Native Americans through the use of the Dawes Act in order to assimilate Native Americans into the American culture by teaching their culture out of them on the reservations in the missionary schools. The melting pot theory of assimilation says just that. We are going to teach the Native Americans to blend, remember the key term here is blend, into American culture and leave their culture behind. The melting pot theory. Everybody comes together to form one singular culture, that give and take, blending together. And remember, the new immigrants are from Southern and Eastern Europe. This group is going to be the one that faces the most discrimination and backlash from Americans because their culture was so different, because their language, their religion was so different. We have Japanese, Chinese, Italians, Germans, French, Serbians. We have a whole large group coming in with Southern and Eastern European countries coming into the United States during this Gilded Age, that period of 1880 to 1920. And the where are they settling again is going to be along the East Coast to settle into those industries where the factory jobs are readily available. All right, that is the last piece. Remember to do your study guide, and you can watch this video again to help you with your study guide. These are the topics you need to know for your Unit 6 test. Any questions you have about this, let me know.